think about East Asian economic cooperation, East Asian FTA in particular. We have the leading Chinese expert regarding this matter with us to share his enlightening views on this very issue, particularly from China's perspective. Mr. Zhang was with us before, and so many of you, I'm sure, have met him before, but let me just say a few words about Professor Zhang, who is currently holding the professorship and directorship of the Institute of Asia Pacific Studies of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, which is the leading think tank for Chinese government. He's also a member of the Foreign Relations Committee of the National Committee of Chinese People's Political Consultative Committee, which as you know, is a very important political organization in China. Actually, he has been representing China in various study groups and task forces for regional cooperation, particularly Asia Pacific. And also he was a member of he served in many the consultative body for Asia-Europe economic cooperation. He was a member of the East Asian Vision Group, and also he was a member of China-ASEAN Cooperation Official Expert Group, and also he was task force for ASEAN, the Economic Cooperation Partnership Task Force. Dr. Zhang was invited as guest speaker or the guest professor or guest scholar to teach at Harvard University and Johns Hopkins University, MIT, and many other prestigious universities in the United States. So it's really fortunate that we have Mr. Zhang at this very critical juncture to talk about Chinese perspective of East Asian economic cooperation, particularly East Asian FTA. Mr. Zhang actually served the chair, group called Joint Expert Group for Feasibility Study of East Asian FTA. And that group produced a report and submitted to the Economic Ministers meeting last September. He chaired and the report was written under his leadership. Actually, this group was established by the recommendation of the ASEAN Plus 3 summit, the ASEAN Plus 3 leaders. And so this report, I suppose, is very seriously, really very seriously taken by the ASEAN Plus 3 leaders. And so I'm sure he will talk about this, the essence of this report, as well as his personal views on these matters, particularly from Chinese perspective. Now with this, please join me in welcoming Professor Zhang.
It's my great pleasure to be here again. Today, probably I first highlight actually some of my thoughts on two things. One is regional integration, especially FTA issue, that group I'm leading just finished a report and what is our major ideas. And then probably your concern history about Chinese current economic situation. Then I open for the questions, try to answer any questions. Now let me first talk about this regional economic integration issue. The East Asia Cooperation has experienced almost 10 years. It started from 1997 as a result of financial crisis. Because of this background, this regional cooperation in East Asia initiated by ASEAN. So ASEAN invited Northeast Asia 3 countries to join together for cooperation to handle the negative impact of the crisis. So that's the first aim. And then in the second year, this cooperation has actually went beyond this crisis management, and leaders start to think about this regional cooperation in a great scope. So I still remember in 98, leaders started to talk about this regional mechanism for future cooperation. But in 99, then President Kim Dae-jung proposed to set up this vision group. And so this vision group created the report. So until today, we still see this, that ASEAN initiating regional cooperation structure as a main foundation. So we have 10+1, 10+3, and last year we had 10+6. So 10+ still major the character of the regional cooperation. But however, following this vision group's report, and we started to think about the longer future perspective. So in our report, the vision group report, we proposed the new concept that is called East Asia Community. And within this community, we still don't know yet what kind of community we'll build. That is quite different from Europe. Europe, from start, they know what they managed to create. But in this part of the world, though we have the concept, but we still don't know what kind of community we want to create. What kind of community we can create. But however, in our recommendation, we propose several pan-regional threats, the institutions. One, of course, we call them FTA, the East Asia FTA. The second, we call them the East Asia Financial Architecture. The third one, we call this broad regional cooperation, including political, social, cultural. So that's highlighted some kind of vision for East Asia. But until now, this main idea, I think generally accepted by leaders, but how to implement all this? This study group recommends 17 main recommendations, which considered to be implementable. Of course, among them, one is FTA. We see FTA, we still have not yet the East Asia FTA. We still are working on 10+1. 10+1 initiated actually by China. We signed the framework agreement with ASEAN in 2002, and trading goods agreement in 2005, and implemented from this year. And service and investment continue for negotiation. And Korea just signed this 10+1, and except it was Thailand, and trading goods, and then investment and service. Japan is still working on the bilateral, but try to move to 10+1 as a whole. So we are still working on this 10+1. And for bilateral in Northeast Asia, we have not seen the big progress yet. And Korea, Japan stopped it. China and Korea just agreed for study. And China, Japan has not started yet. And then in 2004, the economic ministers meet in 10+3 made a decision to set up a group. They call it expert group for feasibility studies of East Asia FTA. So I was assigned as a chairperson, and experts coming from 13 countries who worked more than 1 year to finish the report in September. I reported to economic ministers meeting. So the idea is that it's probably is the time to consider the East Asia and regional FTA rather than just 10+1 or bilateral, which is a key part of this East Asia community building. The second progress, I think, is all well known that financial cooperation. And started from human HSA and based on the bilateral financial cooperation idea, and now try to move to a more regional architecture. That is to enlarge the size of this bilateral commitment, and also try to pool all these resources as a regional resource once the crisis happens. But we have not gone further yet. That is, whether it will become a regional financial system. We have not discussed it yet. But there are already some forces under this architecture. The macroeconomic discussions and financial monitoring are considered. So it may move to a regional distribution in the future, but it is still a long way to go. From some people talk about this Asia currency, but ADB create the president, that is create the Asia monetary unit. Personally, I think it's still, some kind of a concept rather than as a real policy dimension, action. Because regional currencies really need a very, very high political foundation, but we're still far from that. And then let me report some ideas of our report. Our reports we think probably it's a time now to initiate the process of East Asia FTA, that is 10+3. Because if we wait all this 10+1, all this bilateral in Northeast Asia, we don't know when we can finish. So we can consider a parallel process. The 10+3, 10+1 bilateral. So make it 10+3 as an independent process. So which shows the leaders' political commitment, that is, we are willing to move to a regional FTA because businesses are concerned about current situation based on this 10+1 or bilateral. Because in a certain area, really you create a more integrated market, make the business more convenient. But however, in a regional perspective, you have created some new barriers, because as we understand, this East Asia economic integration is based on the market force that is created by business with the support of government, FDI, trade, friendly policy. But now through the negotiation agreements, you create a different kind of markets. So business show their greater concern if they conduct the business based on the East Asia region rather than just based on the limited markets. As we have seen that many of this business, production, service, investment based on the East Asia regional rather than just limited area. So there is a strong pressure from business community to move, to cross over, to go to a regional framework, to reduce the new barriers. So I think this East Asia FTA, the foundation and interest is there. So that's why we propose an early initiative by the leaders. So we propose it may be feasible for leaders to accept this idea of East Asia FTA in this year when they have their leaders meeting. And to get this process on the agenda from next year, that is when leaders talk about the second declaration of East Asia Regional Cooperation. So which means they should finish within the next 10 years. That's the first idea, and we highlighted all these timetables, the supporting issues and all this. According to our group idea, that the negotiation should start at least from 2008, together with Olympic. And we get the new dynamism. We would have the strength to do that. And ideally, after 2 or 3 years negotiation, and we can start the implementation by the year of 2010 or 2011, and then we left for 6 or 7 years to complete by major members of 10+3, that is versus 2018, and then leave some time for less developed members in ASEAN. So at least we can finish it no later than 2020. So that is what the Vision Group recommended, that to finish, to complete this East Asia FTA in 2020. And that is also the APEC goal, that is 2020. So that's why we also create this, at least 2018 East Asia go ahead go, and then East Asia become a driving force to promote this Asia Pacific. So that's very ideal, timetable. But if we fail to initiate courses from 2008 or that's on the agenda next year, and then we don't know when we can finish it. If you see this current 10+1 negotiations, for instance, the China-ASEAN would have concluded the trade in goods, but we committed to finish the negotiation for service investments within 1 year, but now it's a higher delay. So it's need more time. So there must be some, pressure or political commitment and some, strategic designing in the minds to do this, because it's a very difficult thing. The third idea that is, as I mentioned, though we do not wait for 3 10+1s or all bilateral agreements in Northeast Asia, all the China, Japan, Korea trilateral FTA. But, however, we have to consider the existing negotiation results, which are principles, timetables and contents created by this 10+1. So the 3 10+1 can be considered as some kind of foundation to consider for East Asia FTA. So we worked more than 1 year, and which we think we created a very good report. But however, when I reported to 10+3 economic ministers meeting in Floripo, and it was not accepted immediately because the ministers considered it to be too advanced. Because ASEAN is still greatly concerned about this 10+1. And also, personally, I don't think ASEAN is ready to accept this, East Asia regional architecture, since all this 10+ is better than the other for ASEAN in this transitional period in the community building. But however, the economic ministers instruct the senior officials to study our proposal, so we hope, and I will continue to make my effort to promote this ministers and leaders to accept our idea to initiate this process as early as possible. But during the experts from Japan as a joint group finally agreed as a group idea, that is, we start from 10+3. But during the economic ministers meeting, Japan side officially proposed a 10+6 rather than 10+3. They support the 10+6, and the East Asia FTA should get India, Australia, New Zealand along at the beginning. And we had a big debate. Korean ministers, Chinese ministers argued a lot with the Japanese side. So, now we have a different opinion how to start. And we have reservation when we should start. So, I hope we can. That's the current situation. But however, as I mentioned, if we decide to go to this regional integration with this FTA as the main establishment, and they need political determination of the leaders because we have so many problems. This kind of regional FTA is not the easy thing. I still remember this the European Community when they discussed the agriculture, and several ministers sent to the hospital. So it's a very difficult thing. But I think this regional integration process already started. We still have a very strong political commitment and support for all the countries. So since we have established this political dialogue and cooperation architecture, that is 10+3 or 10+6 as a supplement. And so leaders are committed to go. So leaders meeting every year, so they have to discuss all these kind of things. I don't think, though we have North Korean nuclear test, and we'll continue to go through this process. That's our life. That's probably I stop here for this regional integration, and then let me turn to Chinese economy, and also people I think here are very concerned about that. Concerning the Chinese economy, we have seen that in the past 3 years, the GDP growth rate has speeded up. In 2004, the growth rate is 9.5%. 2005, 9.9. This year, the first half has more than 10%. So we have seen an accelerated, growth rate. That's worried a lot. So not just ordinary people, but also government officials worried about this overheating. And government started to contain this early overheating from last year, actually, by these administrative measures to cut off a lot of big projects to reduce investment. And this year, from this spring, central government adopted a more rigid policy that is raised its reserve rate and further reduce the large projects and tight the credit. So until September, we start to see some declining trend of investment. But at the same time, we see that though we have a very high growth rate, but the inflation rate is very low. Last year it was about 2%. This first half of this year is 1.5%. So we have not seen this inflation together with a high GDP growth rate. But why, people are still concerned about this overheating? I think probably the major reason is the trade. And also we have to understand that is what is the major forces that support the Chinese economy growth. 50% of GDP growth rely on investment. That's very high. I remember that during the high peak period of Korea or Japan, the highest investment rate is 40, did not exceed 40%. China now is 50%. And second force is export. So accounts for about 30%. So if investment, domestic investment, plus export, and accounts for 80% of the GDP growth. The consumption is about 20%. So this investment-led GDP growth has created some problems. So if we further analyze the major force of Chinese economic growth, we see the first one is continuous this industrialization process, which China is still experiencing. So it's a major force. It needs a lot of investment. And the second is urbanization. The third one, that is infrastructure. So all three processes need a lot of investment. So that is why investment continues to grow. If you go to China, you see the infrastructure, highways, railways, everywhere. Ports, new ports. So they have a foundation which need a lot of investment. But at the same time, you see, there is also this overheating program that's based on the Chinese economic the politics, that is the local governments become a major driving force to support or initiate this investment. And also, though the central government tightened the credit, but the major banks in China, they have great numbers of branches all over China. So you can't control all this. So we still see in the first half of the year that the loans increased very fast. The loans compared to the last year, it's the same time, and more than 50% more than the last year. And they almost finished 85% in the first half of the year of the target set by the central government, of loan the loan targets set it by the central government. So it's still a lot of new initiatives from local governments. But this current situation actually creates a lot of dangers in the future. One, that is the economy too highly dependent on the investment. And if this investment slows down, the economy can calm down very sharply. And also the export, too highly rely on the growth of export. But this investment supported by export. So they have mutual support. Also, there are some new driving forces. For instance, this real estate, the housing investment. Housing accounts for almost 20% of investment growth. So it's a lot of money. Also, this cars with the new demand. So this creates a situation which demands, more and more investment. So this is how to, slow down this kind of trend. The second, I think, this investment production based on this is not very much on the old structure. Rather than, like the Korean economy is more and more moved to this new sectors. So it's created a similar level, parallel investment structures in Chinese economy. That's why you see, following this, more and more investments, production, you see overproduction, capacity, goods, the brand accumulating surplus. So because they create a similar structure of that. And also they create a similar demand of raw materials, energy, and so on. So the Chinese economy is not, does not rest on this kind of different structure parts. So rather than now they have parallel, similar structures in all different premises and regions. And also because of this very high growth, and the main concern rested on this investment, the growth rate, so they created the other related programs. One is the cost environment. So they have no money, they have no process to, consider this environment. So environment has been deteriorated. And also because investment led this income distribution, regional disparity, and now also become more serious. So you see, on the one hand, you have a very high growth rate, which is very good for China because we have a big labor force which need creating opportunity. But on the other hand, and you see the problems which should not be along with this, economic growth, of course, it's income level, domestic consumptions, regional disparities. So that is why I think the government has to adopt some new policies. One that is try to cool down, and but not cut its growth rate in a big margin, but try to contain this trend, which continue to grow in a higher rate trend. So try to contain this trend, and also contain this kind of parallel, similar structural investments and so on. So that is why the government, for instance, propose innovative, economy. So try to initiate, support more innovations rather than, existing similar investments. And also mobilize the so-called new rural movement to mobilize the rural consumptions, raise the level, and also from the second part of this year, and to increase the social security level, to spend more money on security, encouraging people to consume their own money, and not to worry about too much about future. And this time also include the rural areas. In the past, all this government policy not cover the rural population, but this time, I think, this time. So the Chinese economy, I think, generally is still okay. I don't think there is a big problem. And this trend, the growth trend will continue, but there are a lot of problems that have to be handled. One is growth rate itself, another is structure of economic growth, and third is mounting social problems. But I think this high growth rate will continue for some time. I don't see any major danger which should make Chinese economy crack up. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for a very comprehensive overview of both East Asian Economic Cooperation and the East Asian FTA in particular, and the current situation of Chinese economy. I think there are many questions and comments on these two very important subjects. So I will open this to the floor. As Dr. Kim, continue, please.
Thank you very much for the illuminating comments. I have two questions. One on the FTA.
Made a decision to set up a group. They call it expert group for feasibility studies of East Asian FTA. So I was assigned as a chairperson, and experts coming from 13 countries who worked more than 1 year to finish the report in September. I reported to economic ministers meeting. And so the idea is that it's probably in the time to consider the East Asia pan-regional FTA rather than just 10+1 or bilaterals, which is a key part of this East Asia community building. The second progress, I think, is all well known that financial cooperation started from human initiative and based on the bilateral financial cooperation idea, and now try to move to a more regional architecture. That is to enlarge the size of this bilateral commitment and also try to pool all these resources as a regional resource once the crisis happens. But we have not gone further yet. That is, whether it will become a regional financial system. We have not discussed it yet. But there are already some forces under this architecture. The macroeconomic discussions and financial monitoring are considered. So it may move to a regional distribution in the future, but it's still a long way to go. From some people talk about this Asia currency, but ADB create a surprising that is create Asia monetary unit. Personally, I think it's still some kind of a concept rather than as a real policy dimension, action move. Because regional currencies really need a very, very high political foundation. But we're still far from that. And then let me report some ideas of our report. Our reports we think probably it's the time now to initiate the process of East Asia FTA, that is 10+3. Because if we wait all this 10+1, all this bilateral in Northeast Asia, we don't know when we can finish. So we can consider a parallel process, the 10+3, 10+1 bilateral. So make it 10+3 as an independent process. So which shows the leaders' political commitment that is we are willing to move to a regional FTA because business are concerned about current situation based on this 10+1 of bilateral. Because in a certain area, really you create a more integrated market and make the business more convenient. But however, in a regional perspective, you have created some new barriers because as we understand, this East Asia economic integration is based on the market force that is created by business with the support of government, FDI, trade-friendly policy. But now through the negotiation agreements, you create a different kind of markets. So business show their greater concern if they conduct the business based on the East Asia region rather than just based on the limited markets. As we have seen that many of this business, production, service, investment based on the East Asia regional rather than just limited areas. So there is a strong pressure from business community to move, to cross over, to go to a regional framework, to reduce the new barriers. So I think this East Asia FTA, the foundation and interest is there. So that's why we propose an early initiative by the leaders. So we propose it may be feasible for leaders to accept this idea of East Asia FTA in this year when they have their leaders meeting. And to get this process on the agenda from next year, that is when leaders talk about the second declaration of East Asia Regional Cooperation. So which means they should finish within the next 10 years. That's the first idea, and we highlighted all these timetables, the supporting issues and all this. According to our group idea, that the negotiations should start at least from 2008, together with Olympic. And we get the new dynamism. We would have the strength to do that. And ideally, after 2 or 3 years negotiation, we can start by the implementation by the year of 2010 or 2011, and then we left for 6 or 7 years to complete by major members of 10+3, that is versus 2018, and then leave some time for less developed members in ASEAN. So at least we can finish it no later than 2020. So that is what the Vision Group recommended, that to finish, to complete this East Asia FTA in 2020. And that is also the APEC goal, that is 2020. So that's why we also create this, at least 2018 East Asia go ahead of goal, and then East Asia become a driving force to promote this Asia Pacific. So that's very ideal, timetable. But if we fail to initiate courses from 2008 or that's on the agenda next year, and then we don't know when we can finish it. If you see this current 10+1 negotiations, for instance, the China-ASEAN will have concluded the trading goods, but we're committed to finish the negotiation for service investments within 1 year, but now it's a higher delay. So it's need more time. So there must be some, pressure or political commitment and some, strategic designing in the minds to do this, because it's a very difficult thing. The third idea, that is, as I mentioned, though we do not wait for 3 10+1s or all bilateral agreements in Northeast Asia, all the China, Japan, Korea trilateral FTA. But, however, we have to consider the existing negotiation results, which principles, timetables and contents created by this 10+3s, the 10+1. So the 3 10+1 can be considered as some kind of foundation to consider for East Asia FTA. So we worked more than 1 year, and which we think we created a very good report. But however, when I reported to 10+3 economic ministers meeting in Kuala Lumpur, it was not accepted immediately, because the ministers consider it to be too advanced. Because ASEAN is still greatly concerned about this 10+1. And also, personally, I don't think ASEAN is ready to accept this, East Asia regional architecture, since all this 10+ is better than the other for ASEAN in this transitional period in unity building. But however, the economic ministers instruct the senior officials to study our proposal. So we hope, and I will continue to make my efforts to promote this ministers and leaders to accept our idea to initiate this process as early as possible. But here now, the experts from Japan, as a joint group, finally agreed as a group idea, that is, we start from 10 plus 3. But during the economic ministers meeting, Japan side officially proposed 10 plus 6 rather than 10 plus 3. They support the 10 plus 6, and the East Asian FTA should get India, Australia, New Zealand along at the beginning. And we had a big debate. Korean ministers, Chinese ministers argued a lot with the Japanese side. So, now we have a different opinion how to start. And we have a reservation when we should start. So, I hope we can, that's the current situation. But however, as I mentioned, if we decide to go to this regional integration with this FTA as a main establishment, and they need political determination of the leaders because we have so many problems. And this kind of regional FTA is not the easy thing. I still remember this EU, the European Community, when they discussed the agriculture, and several ministers sent to the hospital. So it's a very difficult thing. But I think this regional integration process already started. We still have a very strong political commitment and support for all the countries. So since we have established this political dialogue and cooperation architecture that is 10 plus 3 or 10 plus 6 as a supplement. And so leaders are committed to go. So leaders meeting every year. So they have to discuss all these kind of things. I don't think, though we have North Korean nuclear test, and we'll continue to go through this process. That's our life. That's probably I stop here for this regional integration, and then let me turn to Chinese economy, and also people I think here are very concerned about that. Considering the Chinese economy, we have seen that in the past 3 years, the GDP growth rate is speeding up. In 2004, the growth rate is 9.5%. 2005, 9.9. This year, the first half has more than 10%. So we have seen an accelerated, growth rate. That's worried a lot. So not just ordinary people, but also government officials worried about this overheating. And government started to contain this early overheating from last year, actually, by these administrative measures to cut off a lot of big projects to reduce investment. And this year, from this spring, central government adopted a more rigid policy that is raised its reserve rate and further reduce the large projects and tight the credit. So until September, we start to see some kind of declining trend of investment. But at the same time, we see that though we have a very high growth rate, but the inflation rate is very low. Last year, 2%. This first half of this year is 1.5%. So we have not seen this inflation together with the high GDP growth rate. But why, people are still concerned about this overheating? I think probably the major reason is the trade. And also we have to understand that is what is the major forces that support the Chinese economic growth. 50% of GDP growth rely on investment. That's very high. I remember that during the high peak period of Korea or Japan, the highest investment rate is 40, did not exceed 40%. China now is 50%. And second force is export. So accounts for about 30%. So if investment, domestic investment plus export, and accounts for 80% of the GDP growth. The consumption is about 20%. So this investment-led GDP growth has created some problems. So if we further analyze the major force of Chinese economic growth, we see the first one is continuous this industrialization process, which China is still experiencing. So it's a major force. It needs a lot of investment. And the second is urbanization. The third one is infrastructure. So this all three processes need a lot of investment. So that is why investment continue to grow. If you go to China, you see the infrastructure, highways, railways, everywhere. Ports, new ports. So they have a foundation which need a lot of investment. But at the same time, you see, there is also this overheating problem that's based on the Chinese economic politics. That is, the local governments become a major driving force to support or initiate this investment. And also, though the central government tightened the credit, but the major banks in China, they have great numbers of branches all over China. So you can't control all this. So we still see in the first half of the year that the loans increased very fast. The loans compared to the last year, at the same time, and more than 50% more than the last year. And they almost finished 85% in the first half of the year of the target set by the central government, of loan government. The loan target set it by the central government. So it's still a lot of new initiatives from local governments. But this current situation actually creates a lot of dangers in the future. One, that is the economy too highly dependent on the investments. And if this investment slows down, the economy can come down very sharply. And also the export, too highly rely on the growth of export. But this investment supported by export. So they have mutual support. Also, there are some new driving forces. For instance, this real estate, the housing investment. Housing accounts for almost 20% of investment growth. So it's a lot of money. Also, this cost with the new demand. So this creates a situation which demands, more and more investment. So this is how to, slow down this kind of trend. The second, I think, this investment production based on this this is not very much on the old structure, rather than, like the Korean economy is more and more moved to this new sectors. So it's create a similar level, parallel investment structures in Chinese economy. That's why you see, following this, more and more investments, production, you see overproduction, that is capacity, goods, the brand accumulating surplus. So because they create a similar structure of that. And also they create a similar demand of raw materials, energy, and so on. So the Chinese economy is not, actually does not rest on this kind of different structure paths. Rather than now they have parallel similar structures in all different provinces and regions. And also because of this very high growth, and the main concern rested on this investment, the growth rate, so they created the other related programs. One is the cost environment. So they have no money, they have no process to, consider this environment. So environment has been deteriorated. And also because investment led this income distribution, regional disparity, and now also become more serious. So you see, on the one hand, you have a very high growth rate, which is very good for China because we have a big labor force which need creating opportunity. But on the other hand, and you see the problems which should not be along with this, economic growth, of course, income level, domestic consumptions, regional disparities. So that is why I think the government has to adopt some new policies. One that is try to cool down, and but not cut its growth rate in a big margin, but try to contain this trend, which continue to grow in a higher rate trend. So try to contain this trend. And also contain this kind of parallel, similar structural investments and so on. So that is why the government, for instance, propose innovative, economy. So try to initiate, support more innovations rather than, existing similar investments. And also mobilize the so-called new rural movement to mobilize the rural consumptions, raise the level, and also from the second part of this year, and to increase the social security level, to spend more money on security, encouraging people to consume their own money, and not to worry about too much about future. And this time also include the rural areas. In the past, all this government policy not cover the rural population, but this time they start. So the Chinese economy, I think generally, is still okay. I don't think there is a big problem. This trend, the growth trend will continue, but there are a lot of problems that have to be handled. One is growth rate itself, another is structure of economic growth, and third is mounting social problems. But I think this high growth rate will continue for some time. I don't see any major danger which should make Chinese economy crack down. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.